And you're also in Worcester County and Hampton County and Berkshire's have, some of the communities like have nil, maybe 1%.
But their tax rates are much lower.
Yeah,
Not all, not all.
I think it's very important to put up the average single-family tax bill if we're going to be concerned about our residential taxes, because the tax rate really doesn't mean very much without having the understanding of what the average single-family tax bill is. I can understand you're putting on here to show for commercial, comparison of the tax rate itself, but when people are worried about the tax bills they're paying, the tax rate really doesn't mean much. You really need to have data on the average single-family tax bill.
I have that information. That's a good point. I was thinking from a commercial perspective.
Right.
Commercial and industrial people look at tax rate. Residents look at tax bill. So we will incorporate that next time.
Right, well, I mean,
It is.
everyone feels they pay too much in taxes, particularly residential taxes. And I think you find that, Sturbridge is always right in the middle. Of the 365 towns, 55 towns in Massachusetts, we're always right in the midpoint. Other communities are always in the 8th percentile. When I was working in Palmer, Palmer was always in the 23rd percentile for their average single-family tax bill. Yet everyone was convinced they're paying too much in taxes.
So good point. I just want to show that the yellow is your residential, the red is your commercial, the purple is your industrial, and the gray is personal property. There's been, over the last, since 15 years, there's been some ebbs and flows in residential value. It's on the upswing. You are just really beginning to recover from the 2008 Great Recession. You actually have been one of the communities that have taken longer to recover. If you are east of 495, that occurred much earlier. But it's only really this year that you're kind of starting to equalize what 2008 was. So that's probably put more tax pressure on the residential as well. So in terms of new growth, commercial industrial is green, and the new growth is in yellow. So you've got new growth pretty consistently from both sectors. So what's also important is Sturbridge is fortunate to have opted for local option rooms and meals taxes. Between the meals tax and the rooms tax, you get about $1.5 million. Some of your neighboring communities don't even levy meals or rooms taxes. Meals is pretty consistently at 0.75. Brimfield only does 4%. You and Southbridge are the only two that have a rooms tax, even though there are a couple places that have rooms and there are Airbnbs in all the communities. And you can tax Airbnbs, but I don't think you've executed that option yet.
The tax percentage of 6% for Sturbridge, when I'm charging at my hotel 11.7% occupancy.
That's the state plus the local. Good question.
Is the local rate at 6%, is that, can Sturbridge, if they wanted to, could they increase that?
You're at the maximum the Commonwealth allows.
Same thing with the meals?
Same thing with the meals. So, but, you haven't been bashful on that, so, so, overall, in the Commonwealth, you rank 40 amongst 350 cities and towns on room taxes. That's pretty phenomenal. You're in the top.
I thought we'd be higher, given the number of rooms we have in town, but.
Well, you've got Cape Cod. You've got,
Most individual towns.
Yeah, but, there's a fair amount in Barnstable, and there's a fair amount in Falmouth.
Again, we weren't, I know we're not number one, no question, but I just thought we'd.
But I would say 40th is of 351 cities and towns. That's really good. And you rank 78th in meals tax. You have a nice restaurant cluster. So that speaks well to the town and, So we wanted to spend a little time about talking about various clusters. Leisure and hospitality, as we've been talking, is an important cluster. It comes in a variety of attributes. You've got hotels, you've got B&Bs, you've got conference centers, you've got a wedding component, you've got special events. It's restaurants and food. You've got breweries now. You've got trails and hiking. And Jen, next slide. So just as an overview of that sector, it's the #1 sector, as I mentioned, as to jobs, 1,500 jobs. It hasn't recovered from the Great Recession high of almost 1,700 jobs. It's the #1 sector as to wages, #2 as to businesses, and it generates $1.5 million. It's a really important sector for you. But the number of establishments has declined since 2015. Your average weekly wage is low, so I am sorry, Bob, I overspoke. $424 a week, $22,000 annually. Employment can be seasonal. It was identified by the Central Workforce Development Agency, which is the jobs and training agency for Worcester and South Worcester County, as a critical sector. This is a sector where sometimes people can get back on their feet and work in a kitchen or work in accommodations. So sometimes it's not the best wage, but it's an entry wage. So this has some opportunity. There's also manufacturing, and you have a variety of manufacturers. You have a lot of wire. Now, you have some wire manufacturers. You have about, I think, 15 or 16 manufacturers overall. Because American Optical was in Sturbridge, there were a lot of businesses after American Optical closed that spun off into fiber optics and some photonics. So that's not just in Sturbridge, it's in Southbridge, it's in Dudley, it's in a little farther east in Oxford. And that's it wasn't mentioned in the South Worcester County SES, which is the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, but it's kind of a sleeper that I think is really a diamond in the rough for you. So let's look at the next slide. As I've mentioned earlier, manufacturing, when I look at the data, is a steady sector. It was not hit a lot by the Great Recession. It just kind of stayed stable. It blipped a little, but it didn't cave. It ranks 5th as to jobs. There's 500 jobs, and that's been pretty consistent. Has the 2nd highest sector as to payroll, 3rd highest as to weekly wage. I guess there's 2 dollar signs, but it's about $64,000, $65,000 annual wage. So that can contribute to a living wage for a family with 2 earners. As I mentioned, it's a growth industry in Southern Worcester. It's a priority industry in Hampden County. And it's a critical industry. So there's a lot of people who are kind of rooting and willing to support manufacturing. So this is kind of the one industry that I think is less visible in Worcester because it's kind of tucked away and people don't see it, but it's it's an important sector for you.
What do you really mean by metal wire manufacturing?
Well, the Pioneer Valley is really kind of the hardware. Historically, it was the hardware valley between Connecticut and Massachusetts. And some of that because you have precision manufacturing and people working with metals, and you have people who do metal wire. So it's a class of manufacturing.
I'm not really familiar with any companies and services that actually manufacture wire.
Right. They use wire in the metal type products.
I think there are some machine shops in Sturbridge, but I would agree,
Oh, we have South Machine Metal, we have Allen Tool, we have certainly a lot of metal manufacturing, type companies, but wire production doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, we have and it's,
Yeah, there's no
yeah.
wire.
There's a number of different facilities, and they each have some, they deal with they're all using wire in a different way. Like, what is it, Optum is using them to draw out very thin wires to help with the cameras that they develop for, like Border Patrol. We have OFS, which is, developing, they're not using metal wires, but they're creating all the fiber optics. Yeah, so each one is, and as a history major, it's very hard for me to understand what they do when we've gone and seen these facilities, but they go in they develop these very, very fine metals throughout, is what we've seen on tours.
I'm trying to be misleading, but thank you, Kevin, for the expanded definition. But the good part is they're in high value added products, and they are also in durable manufacturing. So that's having value added manufacturing strengthens your economy. So it's an input, and they're generating funds from outside the region and doing sales outside the region. So that's a high value item. So professional and technical services, they can locate in good office space, and this is a growing sector. Next slide. So it's one of your top 5 sectors. It was number 4 in 2018. It has 41 establishments. It has a $22 million payroll. It's one that we don't really think about, but it's a growing sector. There were over 200 people employed in 2018. It's kind of increasing its visibility on the radar screen. And I think it reflects that perhaps some people who have been commuting in Sturbridge may be now saying, let's work in Sturbridge. Because one of the things that when we've heard from some businesses, they have indicating difficulty hiring professional labor and professional talent that's readily available in the local workforce. So having a growing professional and technical services, that's a segment that has potential to grow. And it does not have unusual real estate needs. It could basically be offices. It can be part of, a office services building or retail area. And as retail decreases, sometimes services and offices move into that space. So speaking of retail, we had talked about how that employed about 20% of the people in Sturbridge. And retail is important as part of your visitor attraction because historically retail was, and shopping was a major activity for tourism in Massachusetts. Retail, the number of establishments has decreased. It's now 47. That's about a 30% decrease. There was a large drop since 2015. This is not surprising, nor is it unique to Sturbridge. It's happening throughout the country. You see more and more vacancies in shopping malls, and that is because of the rapid increase of online commerce. You see more and more Amazon trucks or UPS trucks running around town. That's as a result of people shifting their shopping. And if you have a lot of residents who are working in Boston or working and driving 25 miles a day each way, they're on their lunch hour shop and have it delivered so they have more time to spend on what they want to do and with their families. And I see a lot of women nodding their heads. So retail is changing, but it's still an activity when people have leisure time, they like to do a little shopping because it's the one time they can shop. So it's a declining but key sector. It's being disruptive. You have both large-scale national retailers ranging from, Walmart to the dollar store, but you also have mom and pop retailers. So it's having that balance and mix, and you need both. It's, again, low-wage work for the most part, and it's a $24,000 annualized wage. So we've got to figure out how you want to keep retail in your mix, but it's not a sustainable wage for someone. Healthcare and social assistance was not really barely on the radar screen 5 years ago in terms of Sturbridge. It's now one of your major sectors. It's number one as to establishments. It's the fourth largest sector as to jobs. It has 524 jobs. It's a growth sector for Southern Worcester County. It's a priority sector for Central Mass workforce development. So what's driving the growth in healthcare? Aging population, interest in wellness and fitness, and you have a population base that are high consumers of healthcare because you have a large aging segment. 17% of the residents of Sturbridge are over 64 years of age. And as our bodies get older, they get creakier and need more doctor visits. And then babies, kids, and youth are high, they get chicken pox, they, fall and break their ankle, or they need vaccine shots, so they're high consumers. And 25% of your population is under 18. So you are at a really sweet spot for growth in medical healthcare services. Another type of industry sector that when you think about the Mass Pike and I-84, you're in the center of New England. You can get to Connecticut, you can get to New York, you can get to Albany in 2 hours, you can get to Boston in an hour, hour and a half. You can get to Manchester and north. So would logistics make sense? It's a growing sector nationally and internationally, and e-commerce is driving the sector growth. There's a lot of desire because we want to order the same day or next day. It's really in the headlights for disruption because of automated electric vehicles, AEVs, because the freight and trucking are looking at AEVs first, particularly for movements within the yard, as well as looking at for when it becomes legal to put it on the road. So there's a lot of potential for disruption. There is a really high demand for logistics and warehousing near population centers. And when I talk to real estate brokers, they're finding that even on 495, they're finding difficulty in finding logistics and warehousing space. So they're now looking at 295 and 395. 128 is out of the question. So depending upon how that cycle goes, Sturbridge could be the next wave. So that's something to think about. The things that might be kind of some weaknesses as to warehousing and logistics is you don't really, you're not an aviation or rail center. The communities through, along Route 9 have the CSX rail and some of the, and Ware has the junction. But there's some real possibilities. And so for selected locations, this might be a real opportunity. So I've been talking a long time. I'm glad you're peppering me with questions. As I said, we did do a business and residence survey. We have not closed the surveys. They're available online. So these are preliminary findings. So, but We asked people about the business climate and quality of life. We asked it for the business community and the residents community. So Sturbridge as a place to do business. Basically, about half said it was good in the business community, and 20% said it was excellent. When we asked residents about the quality of life in the last 3 years, they said it remained the same. It's improved 25%. So I would say there's a general level of satisfaction. I think people are...
Remain the same, does that mean they thought it was good, or they didn't like it?
I don't know if remain the same is good or bad. It says remain the same, so I don't want to infer that it's bad, or I don't want to infer that it's good. I'm being neutral on that.
Half full, it was fabulous.
But, you know, improvement is good. So next. So we asked residents about the importance and role of business. So we, you know, the darker the green, the more important it is. You know, very important, important, useful, and then the gray was unimportant. So employment opportunities, source of tax revenue, 49% said it was very important, 38% said it was important. So that's a key issue. Corporate citizens, people thought that was important. And very important. That was actually second to employment opportunities. And sustainable green businesses, people thought it was important and useful, but it lags behind the other three variables. So clearly, good corporate source of tax revenue, corporate citizens, employment opportunities, and the three were the top three. We asked residents how they thought businesses were faring on those variables. So employment, people thought it was good. Tax revenue, not as good. Corporate citizen, better. Sustainable business, you know, good, but many people said they don't know. So I think one of the things that I took from this is there's at least 20% who feel like they don't know how the business community is doing. And that's particularly true in terms of tax revenue. So when you look at 5% of your land resources generating 13.5% of your tax base, that's pretty good. And you know, when we just talked earlier, being over 10% would be admired by many communities. That's also very good. So I don't think people have that comparative context.
When you did the calculation on 5% giving us 13% of our tax base, did you include in there the meals tax and the hotel tax? Or was it just property tax?
We just asked what they thought.
No, going back into the other slide.
Oh, that was just property tax.
So if you tacked on the hotel tax and the meals
It's
tax,
even more.
that would be a greater percentage
Right.
of total taxes
Right,
to the town.
right. Because it's,
But on 5% of bill state.
yeah. And meals and room are not part of the levy, so I didn't,
Right, I understand.
yeah.
I just-
But good to clarify. So we asked people what people thought the town should be doing about economic development, and this is to the residents. And this is in the order of what people thought was important. People thought we should be thinking about diversifying the economy, doing some arts and culture programming, preserving small town atmosphere, selectively using tax incentives, and that aesthetics were important. So those were the top 5. Some people wanted more development. 2/3 want more development. And not quite 2/3, but over 60% say to be selective. So there's some trends that are not, you know, that we've some, and potential points of disagreement amongst town residents. But I think there's a lot of unanimity. So on the business survey, how has Sturbridge changed as a place to do business? 32% of businesses responding said it's better than 3 years ago. And 50% said about the same, and I don't know if that's good or bad. In terms of how supportive is Sturbridge town government to local businesses, the business community said 44% was very supportive. Somewhat supportive was another 24%. Neither supportive or unsupportive is 12%. And then somewhat unsupportive was 20%. And some people would say, well, just being neutral is where people should be. Other people would advocate to be more positive. But I think that's a pretty decent report card, and it's better than most people would think.
Can you repeat the numbers of businesses who participated in the survey?
We will, these are preliminary findings. So as we finalize it, we are going to do a much more detailed accounting.
So to be clear, if you go on to sturbridge.gov on Monday, the links will be reposted more prominently. They're there now, but we'll just repost it so it's like first thing.
Okay.
So we encourage you, if you're a resident and haven't filled this out, to A, fill it out, and if you're a business owner, to fill it out as well. But
And if you work for a local business, ask them to fill it out.
we also should be clear, we mailed this survey out to every business in town, whether it was everything from one of the manufacturers to a small, operation out of your home. Everyone should have gotten a letter. We did get some returns, but almost 500 letters went out. So no,
Which is not surprising.
yeah. And we're still collecting.
Okay, so next. So we asked people, what are the factors important to my business in Sturbridge? And also why they located in Sturbridge. Number was reason there was space available. It was easy. There was a place I could rent or buy. The convenient location was number 2, highway access. People like to live near where they work, so, if they live in Sturbridge, that's why they put their business in Sturbridge. And then some people said close to the customer base. What's important? Water, sewer, 80%, reliable electric, highway access, public safety, streamlined permitting and parking. Kind of basics, but you got to take care of the basics. So that's why they're so important. So we also asked people about what their future plans were. 17% of the businesses said they plan to expand or relocate in the next 3 years. 22% said they might expand or relocate. So I think I want to kind of do some kind of alerts on people considering expansion. 55% said they were thinking about staying in Sturbridge. But then another 36% said they were thinking about somewhere in Worcester County. And that's in part because you don't have a lot of space. And then only 21% of the businesses said they had significant room to expand. So they may have some room to expand, but not significant room to expand. So we also asked them about their intent to adding people, creating jobs. Almost 40% said they intended to hire and add staff. 26% said they might possibly be hiring. So when we asked them about their challenges, 46% said they had a problem hiring middle-skilled workers. So that's kind of people who are not like the owners or primary manager, but might be a supervisor or a more highly skilled person. 28% said they have a problem, and a severe problem. This is a problem or severe problem, hiring professional and managerial workers. And it's not that professional and managerial workers don't live in Sturbridge. They go to Boston because they probably are getting paid more, or the $4.95. The other issue that has come up anecdotally is people say, well, if I'm recruiting someone and they're young and they're in that professional managerial, what's there to do in Sturbridge? And when I was growing up, I had a colleague's mother say, if it's a good place to raise a family, it's probably not a good place for a young person to hang out in. And I think that might be a little bit of the case in Sturbridge. This is a good place to raise a family, but those young unmarrieds may not be their first choice, unless you have some other things that you want to offer. So that's one of the challenges. But you're close to Worcester. There's other things, so but that business recruitment is a real key issue. And I want to underscore that, because if people are finding a severe problem, they can't grow at this location. And they will also think about moving. The reason why GE moved out of Connecticut was because of recruitment of young talent, because they moved to Boston. It was harder to recruit to suburban Connecticut. So some of the critical issues from the business community's perspective as well as the resident. And if you look at this, there's some agreement. From the business community, the number one issue was revitalization of the commercial tourism district, Route 20. Traffic, increasing commercial and business development, taxes, strengthening tourism and visitation, and pedestrian walkways and sidewalks. Residents said traffic, and then revitalization of the commercial tourism district. So the top two are the same. Increasing commercial development, local taxes. Residents were concerned about facilities and program for youth and diversifying Sturbridge's economic base. So on the top three, you're in agreement.
What does revitalization of a commercial tourism district, what does that actually mean?
Well, one of the things about Route 20, particularly when you go from the Sturbridge Host and Old Sturbridge Village to the Holland Road, there's very few places where you can walk. And when you look at your competing communities, particularly communities that are kind of have living history locations, like Mystic, like Portsmouth, and there are a few others, they have walkable business districts, or they have a walkable campus where everything's located. You don't have that. And that's why pedestrian walkways and sidewalks is an important issue to the business community, particularly smaller businesses. So some of that is on the Route 20 commercial area, you have the Quinnebog River just south of Route 20. There's a lot of people who have driven down Route 20 to Brimfield that don't know the Quinnebog River is there, and don't know that you have the Great River Race every April, and that there's recreational resources. That is one of your big secrets. And it's hard to attract visitors to use them or increase your length of stay when it's a big secret. So part of the design of the commercial tourism district was to look at how to improve traffic flow on Route 20, to provide sidewalks as well as some amenities and access points. So the recent town meeting action to acquire some land for parking was an initial step, but there's also, there were 25% construction plans prepared for traffic and sidewalk access along Route 20 that have been sitting and waiting for funding and waiting for town leadership to move forward. It is a state road, but Jean, correct me if I'm wrong. It's a state road, but I think you have some local maintenance on it, or is it all state maintenance right now?
It's all state, but we have been in conversations with MassDOT, and they're fairly supportive of the plans with some minor modifications.
We initially listed that project.
Yeah.
That's great. New leadership making a difference. So, you have a question?
No, I just have a comment.
Okay.
Okay, so, I'm thinking about from New Boston Road all the way down, not just from, one thirty-one,
Mm-hmm.
Great Motel, but I see numerous, I would say they're tourists, going from the new, hotel, Panera, but people wanna walk from there to downtown, and I see them, walking across a dirt path along the side of the road, or when there's snow, they'll be actually walking on Route 20 to get back to the, hotel, and I just wonder why, the Route 20 set has looked the same for years, it's not cleaned up. It has many dysfunctional road signs, directing people all over the place. Signs get knocked down in accidents, they don't get replaced. My street sign on my road, Fisk Hill, at the Route 20 Fisk Hill intersection, that's been gone for years. Somebody knocked it over, and people need to get around, and it's like, that intersection is not lit up. A lot of street lights are out in town, if you look, drive up and down the streets.
No curb appeal.
There's nothing, the side, the trash isn't maintained, every day should be Earth Day. All the business should be, like I say, I see people, tourists trying to cross the Route 20 section, maybe to go from the host to Friendly's or whatever. I see them running across the road, they get to the median strip, and then they gotta figure out how they're gonna get across from there. And I just think it's been,
Which is why you need to have a plan and make physical improvements, because it's almost a pedestrian accident waiting to happen, because drivers don't know where to expect. Drivers coming off of 84 are not expecting to see a pedestrian. But there are pedestrians because people, after they're driving and spending time or a weekend or a meeting, they want to walk. They want to get out of their car. So that's why the pedestrian sidewalk issue is an important issue for business. And your town administrator and town planner were just saying that they've been in touch with DOT, so that's a start in the right direction. And you've got plans so that you can move them forward. It's going to probably require some town meeting support as well as some leadership support. So Rome wasn't built in a day, but it's on the radar screen, and you've got a lot of support for it. So, but I think your observation,
when is it gonna get going? Like, I know there was a plan for a large rotary that, Route 131 and 20, a rotary that might reduce.
do you,
That is the commercial source district plan that's up on that list.
So yes, we've been in contact. My name's Jeff Bridges, I'm the town administrator. So when I got here, it was one of my priorities is to get that project back on track or get it initiated. So we've talked to the regional planning agency, we've met with DOT, we've now gotten DOT to provide revised comments to the plan and what was their preference for phasing, because there's no way to do the entire project from New Boston Road to, what is it, 148 in one fell swoop. You just can't. So they've said the first phase would be the rotary, that area, then the next phase and the next phase as you travel along the road. So our responsibility at this point is to go ahead and initiate that project with CMRPC and Mass DOT to get it on their radar screen and begin the process of designing the actual improvement. So one of the things that I've included in my request for budget next year is $300,000 for preliminary engineering. And that'll come from the Chapter 90 money that the state gives us for road improvements. So that is where we are today. I think it's going to be a long haul. These projects take 5 years from when you put it in the system to actual start of construction. It's just the nature of the beast. So, but once we get the first phase under design, and into production, then we'll initiate the next phase. So at some point, we'll either be building or designing the entire corridor at the same time. But it's just going to take time.
I'll never see it to completion, is that what you're saying?
No,
I mean, I'm
I've,
60 years old, so how long is it gonna take for me to actually see how beautiful this town?
well, you're a very young-looking 60, so imagine you're gonna be able to enjoy it. I would hope. You know, I want to get it done. I think it's important. I think the pedestrian capabilities of that sector, you know, you have two basic commercial sectors of the town. You've got the more regional attraction, the Walmart and the grocery store up there, but then you've got not quite a neighborhood business district, but something that could be very pedestrian friendly, very attractive to youth who want to enjoy an outdoor experience, but then go have coffee or have a meal, or other people that just want to be able to walk up and down a street with attractive lighting, wide sidewalks, maybe some outdoor music somewhere down the road, right? And those are things you can do, but it's about focus. And that's one of my responsibilities, is to provide focus to that project and keep it going no matter what. And that's what I'm here for.
And this is fresh air and music to my ears, because I know you've gone through several town administrators, so it's really nice.
I want to stay, and I want to get this done.
Scott, didn't we do a preliminary study and design with the circle and all
Oh,
that
yeah.
years ago?
So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take those plans. We sent them back to DOT several months ago. Give us revised comments, because it was 2014 when the last time DOT looked at it. Give us revised comments on what they have done, and now we're in the process of
Well, and traffic volumes have changed in the last 5 years, so you got,
There's a process to get these started. You get them on what's called the Transportation Improvement Plan, which is part of our regional planning agency. And once we get it in that system, then DOT and the town and CMRPC, which is our regional planning agency, can now move the project forward and can compete for funding. Because really, at the end of the day, it has to compete for funding.
What happened to the effort some years ago, not all that many years ago, when there was a plan and all that?
then,
It's less than 25% design, so we have to bring it to the next level. So it's the same plan, we just need to take it to the next level.
So they're gonna build Polar Park and change Kelly Square by next year, that's gonna be done.
I know. And they've been talking about Kelly Square for,
Of course, on the other hand, they started that project how many years ago, and they're just finally getting it.
With projects like these, it's about focus. It's all about focus and keeping your eye, regardless of whatever else goes on. Something this big, which is really a regional project, because you get so much transportation and so many people going back and forth to businesses. You have to stay focused and keep this one moving regardless of what else is going on. And I think that's the responsibility of the town staff and the board of selectmen, to keep this project on their radar and take steps every day to move it down. And as we go, you're gonna see disruption, right? We have to make the businesses in the community aware that when we're doing work along this corridor, there's going to be disruption, and we have to communicate and communicate and communicate with everybody, the commuters, the businesses in particular, who occupy space along that corridor, that we're gonna do X, Y, Z. There's gonna be tons of public input on what happens, but at the end of the day, it's a once-in-a-generation project, and we have to stay focused.
It's a beautiful town, it just needs to be tweaked a little bit, to make
Absolutely.
it even more beautiful.
Absolutely, decorative lighting, sidewalks, and all these things.
and it helps to have you at meetings periodically asking, how's progress?
What have you done today?
Exactly. That helps keep the town administrator and the select board focused. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm glad you brought up the fact that there were plans. But those were 25%, and they've got to get to 50%. And it's incremental, but you got to keep taking those steps. Rome wasn't built in a day. I like the Carl Ripken theory of base hits, you take, and you move around. So,
A few years ago, the rail came up by a study by one of the selectmen at that time to connect to the rail. What do you think the feasibility is for that? And do you think it would benefit Sturbridge?
the train?
The train, yes. Because the reason I bring this up is in trying to bring more tourism here, with the polar park that you talked about, the local hotels could capitalize on that and maybe give a train pass, for example, to anybody who stays 2 days, let's say. Because I know if you go to the Cape, you stay 2 or 3 days, you get a meal ticket, or you get something to a restaurant, whatever. And if you could do something like this, would that not help and pull it a little out of Worcester?
I think there's a couple different things on that. Doing a rail, you do not have an existing rail line that you can capitalize connecting Sturbridge and Worcester, or Sturbridge, or Worcester, Sturbridge, Springfield. I haven't looked at that, but I will say 49 is not in your sweet spot, which is Route 20,
Yeah, but it's a sweeter spot than driving. I mean, if you would...
From my professional perspective, I think you've got the Sturbridge Commercial Tourism District. That is your big capital project that you've got to get done. And more people are driving. Yes, there are people taking the train. I personally am a train advocate, but I think you will move farther and faster focusing on the roundabout and the capital improvement project you now have on the radar screen. When people start muddying the water, DOT is going, well, what do you want, a rail line or a commercial district? So you guys got to be clear. You will have more impact with more eyeballs and more visitors having a better welcoming on on the exit 3.
One of the things, the east-west rail study is still proceeding. The state convention is helpful. They've issued preliminary information on 4 options. And the closest option that might help Sturbridge would be a passenger station in town. And that's certainly part of it. But the numbers they put out are very, very significant. And they're still having hearings on it. There'll be a final decision probably in the next several months. Where they're going to push forward.
It's not a bad idea.
No, it isn't, but it's certainly not something that there's funding available for right now. But, I mean, it is a plan, they are working on it, and the idea of another stop in East Brookfield in that area, certainly they're not part of the study. But it's barely holding on to the idea that the Palmer passenger station could remain part of the plan.
Yeah, I think the rail it's a nice idea, but I think one of the things that we need to think about is, like Kathy's saying, people are driving, people are getting in their cars, are going places. We had the STA, Sturbridge Tourist Association, met with its consultant. We have actually 2 concurrent studies going on, and one of the things that they said is we need to make Sturbridge a hub and a spoke. So you come and stay in Sturbridge, and then you go out and you go to Worcester, you go to those games. And we've met the president of that organization. We've said, hey, can we do, he's interested in doing like Sturbridge nights. So there are ways that we can capitalize on Worcester and our proximity to it because, and we have a couple hoteliers here, if you want to stay somewhere, you could stay in Sturbridge and still get to Worcester in 20 minutes. I live in Connecticut, and I know we always think Worcester is like miles and millions of miles away, but it's really close. It is really close. So I think we need to, if we can sell our proximity to all these things. Within 30 minutes, you can get to bedding in Springfield. You can get to shopping in any number of locations. Pick a direction. You can go find some shopping and, stay right here in Sturbridge. There's a lot to do if you stay right here in Sturbridge and kind of highlight that we're within a drivable distance. Rail is great, but the immediate that we can do is with the cars. And that's a low cost versus making a multi-million-dollar investment in rail.
They just had a meeting in Springfield Wednesday, and they presented the real plan. Different, I think 7 different views, but the cheapest was $2 billion, all the way up to $25 billion. But you can go online and read, their projections on money, and even their projections on passengers. They didn't have very high expectations of the number of passengers even, but it's all online.
Can we get, and I'm going to ask the town administrator, can we link that on our site? Because I get a lot of, the reason I brought it up is I get a lot of residents who have raised that to me. And so I figured while we're here, I'm going to raise it to you.
That's great.
So if we could put that link, and then people can read it and say, I was thinking about, I didn't realize this, I didn't know this, versus I can't make the phone call to all the people who have contacted me and give all that information that they can certainly access.
We'll track that down.
That's the mass DOT's
Just a general observation, the sheer convenience of being able to get into your car whenever you choose, go wherever you want to go, compared with a train which goes from A to B, no diversions, and it operates when the train system is going to operate. Those two comparisons are poles apart. And you wonder why people are in their cars? I don't want them in my car. I can go where I want, whenever I want.
Mass Pike's always back.
Not everyone has a car.
Well, it is that, I understand that, but I tell you, I cannot quite understand why the numbers, projected numbers for train travelers is low. I mean, sure, you can go past by the train.
You have lower density in and around the Sturbridge, Charlton area, and you do not, while you have a fair number of people going to Boston, it's a likely train is not stopping at 495 or, going north to Westboro. So people are looking at where are their work trips. And it's usually work trips where most people are taking the train. And I just want to put a context. Since the 1980s, the Commonwealth has been talking about South Coast Rail. They have finally gotten to design plans on South Coast Rail. So it's a long haul. And I think that's not to say that it might not be a really good asset and a positive thing, but I think the notion of looking at the entrance to Sturbridge and looking at the commercial tourism district plan and looking at the roundabout and the sidewalks, that's your capital priority in terms of the Commonwealth. And I've worked in with a lot of towns, and some towns have a wish list as long as their arm, and people go, they'll get the $5,000 for trees, but they don't get what they really want. So focus on what you really want. That, commercial tourism district was number 1 and number 2 on your business and residence survey. That says a lot. Yeah, they're linked.
To give you some context too, we're still collecting resident surveys, but we're just shy of like 300 of those, and which is for a town survey, having done a few, that's pretty good. I mean, Gene's done a few, 300 is a decent number. So it's not an insignificant number of residents who are making these comments.
So I'd stay focused, and it's critical. And it's critical for being focused on the TIP, Transportation Improvement Plan. It's critical for focus with your elected officials. So do we have any other, I think that might have been the last one, yeah. So we just kind of morphed into the discussion, which is a good way of doing it. So I want to say thank you for coming, and we'll stay. We love to have your comments. If you haven't taken a survey, or the business and resident survey will be posted more visibly online.
Can you give us a sense for time frame? So I know there was a chart, but what happens now?
We're going to finish some of the data collection. We wanted to get some feedback, and we'll be back in April and May.
Yeah, the goal by end of May, this whole thing is going to be complete. That's our time frame. So early June.
Yeah.
And we're now looking for funding for the rotary thing.
That's separate from what I'm doing, but
I forgot about it.
all-
Funding's available, we have chapter 90 money to use for our piece of the preliminary engineering, and then we would have to seek state funding for the actual improvements. It's millions of dollars each phase.
but if you don't do the design work, it's kind of like, you kind of move forward, and then the state says, we'll do this, and then they say, you better do that, so it's like, but getting it on the tip and advancing the design is huge. So, congratulations, thank you for that leadership. And thank you for all your interest. If you have any more comments, don't be shy. We'd love to, and thank you for coming.